so very, very much for tuning in with Real Solutions with Anna Aquino, and I am just so honored and blessed to have the super fabulous ninja author that she is, Marie Everson. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I love it.
Yes, and as I was saying, we were talking earlier. I actually met Eva Marie. I was at her book signing. It was July 4th, and I have to think about it, 2000 and something. My daughter's 14 and a half years old, so it's been a while. And I was 9 months pregnant with my oldest daughter, and I had just written my first manuscript. That one still isn't published. Didn't know what to do with it, and I ran into you at a book signing. It was the last thing we did before going into the hospital to
Wow.
deliver. And
Wow.
you gave me some really great advice. And you said to me, ask anybody who will talk to you, and just God will lead you to go where you need to do. And I get those questions all the time about how do you do it, how do you do it, how do you do it. So I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that for her, it was probably like, oh, it was another one of those again. But I so appreciated it. I so appreciated it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, when we were talking earlier, I said I have no memory of that, of course. If it was July the 4th, I was probably hot and miserable anyway. So amazing that I even left the house. But but it's true. You
Yes,
just keep knocking on doors. You just knock on that
yes,
door, and then you knock on that door,
yes,
and you knock on that door.
yes,
Yeah. You don't
yes,
leave any door unopened, and
absolutely.
the right ones will open.
Absolutely. And that was such a cute little bookstore. It's not there anymore. It was Long's
I know.
Edgewater Drive. Um, but anyway, I just so appreciated that then. And I actually, while I was recovering from my pregnancy, read the series, which we'll talk about, which is the Shadows of Light
Oh, the
series.
Shadow series.
Yes,
Yeah, long time ago. Wow.
yes, it was a really long time ago, but I loved it. Anyway,
Oh, thank you.
so I was talking to you earlier. I want to, with the show, is that we have a real God who works in the lives of real people. Everyone has a story. He gives us real solutions. What is your story? How did you get to where you are today, the awesome writer that you are? How did God bring
Well,
you here?
I've written my whole life, but that doesn't mean that I studied to be a writer or any of those things. I actually studied to be a nurse, and which was maybe the good news for some people, the bad news for others. I knew that this was not what I was being called to do, and yet I gave it 110%
Oh,
all the time. I have a compassion for anyone who is sick. I'm not overly compassionate person, but I have a lot of compassion for anyone who is sick. And I was very adamant that if you were on my floor or my ward, you were going to be treated with dignity and that kind of thing. So years went by, and I actually contracted an illness that left me unable to work. And I spent a lot of time reading. And as I would read, because that was about all I could do. And as I would read, I would think, well, I could have written that, And I mean, not like I was saying, oh, I'm better than this, but I'm thinking, why didn't I do this?
yeah.
I would almost have the sense of where the words were going to go or where the story was going to go. So if that is just inbred in me, if God just naturally put that in me, why didn't I just follow that? And so one thing just kind of led to another. And this is one of those crazy things. I was offered a job writing for a children's ministry. Now, what I know about a children's ministry, and and again, that's just how funny God is. It's like, he didn't call Esau, he called Jacob.
Right.
He calls the one that you would least expect.
Uh-huh.
He didn't call David's 7 or 8 other brothers. He called David and like Gideon.
Mhm.
Gideon's like, me, and he's like, yeah, you. And Gideon is saying this while he's hiding in a cave. Well, that was kind of like me. It's like, me, you want me to write for children? But what I really heard was, you want me to write?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so for a year I did that, and I received training that I otherwise would not
Wow.
have received about editing on the fly and about listening to what the director wanted and being able to present that and to give that and to write under pressure or to write under a timeline. I mean, I learned so much from that. And then just by a series of events. I ended up at what was then called CBA International Retail Show, which is now called ICRS,
Mm-hmm.
the International Christian Retailer Show. But in those days, writers could go onto the floor if you had a pass, and I had a pass. It was here in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
You could talk to the editors.
I've been there.
And I made an appointment with 12 editors.
Wow.
And I just, I just went in and I gave it everything I had.
That's awesome.
And 9 days later, I received a phone call from one of those editors who said, "We'd like to offer you a contract."
Wow.
That door just simply swung wide open, and I walked through it like I knew what I was doing. I had no clue what I was doing, but I acted like I knew what I was doing, And I think that there was, I think what served me well and what served me best. And I can say this now because I have now spent nearly 20 years, whenever I go all the way back to the beginning, almost 20 years working with writers, new writers, old writers, writer wannabes, etc., is that I was so eager to do this. And it wasn't that I accepted anything that was put in front of me. I don't want to say it like I didn't ask God, because I certainly did. Is this where you want me to be? Is this where you want me to be? Etc. But I took direction. I listened. The editor said, I want you to try to write it this way. That's exactly what I did. I've never, in all of these years, and now with all of this information that I now have, I have never once bucked an editor to the point where, it became a battle. I might have said, "I really feel strongly about this word or this paragraph or even this chapter or this character." But for the most part, when editors have come in and said, "We need to lose this character, we need to rewrite this section." And in fact, my most recent novel, Five Brides, the editor came back and said, "You need to rewrite the entire thing." So I just threw away 85,000 words, although nothing is ever really thrown away.
Right.
But I took that 85,000 words and I had to completely restructure it. I didn't argue. I listened. I trusted. And I would say that again and again. And you know what? In my own heart, I knew she was right about the work. I turned around 2 months later, gave them 123,000 words.
Wow.
123,000 words of a work in 2 months of a work that just hit #1 on the CBA bestseller list. So you know what? They were so right. And my thing with new writers is listen to the people who have been doing this for a while. We're doing this and we're continuing to do this because we listen.
Right.
And this is just what you have to do.
And that is such good advice to people because, you have to, Bible teaches us that pride comes before a fall. And how many times have we heard, to be teachable and correctable? And I tell the story a lot of times, and I've said similar things. I wrote this little short story once, which I thought was pure genius, and nobody else understood it. And I'm still to this day annoyed that nobody else understood it because I just thought it was a moment of genius. But thinking about it, it was kind of creepy. No wonder why nobody liked it. And I ended up scrapping it. But still, just because it makes sense in your head doesn't mean it makes sense in everyone else's.
Well, somebody needs to tell that to Pablo Picasso.
That's so true.
Yes,
it's so true.
They consider him an artistic genius. I just think it's a whole bunch of colors thrown on a canvas. I don't know.
So do you find?
Where's your head?
That's funny. It's over here. Do you find? I mean, I saw a meme the other day for writers, and I thought this was so funny. It had I can't remember who the actor was, but suddenly he knew all these things about molecular biology, and they were like, "Since when did you become an expert on molecular biology?" And they said, "Last night, I'm writing a series."
Right.
Did you find, though, that your time as a nurse, even if that wasn't exactly where God wanted you to be, that helps you as a writer?
Sure.
Because some of those things that you're pulling from in that time.
Well, for one thing, when you're in nursing, whether you are in a nursing home, you're in a medical office, you are in a hospital, whatever, any kind of medical facility, you have the opportunity to observe people, the way different people respond and react to tragedy, to illness, to family, there, I would always see family dynamics, and there were
Right.
different family dynamics based
Right.
on whatever the family was.
Right.
My greatest regret when it comes to my nursing and my writing, if I can, like throwing those two things together, I was charge nurse 3 to 11 at Nightingale Nursing Home in Statesboro, Georgia, for a season of my life, and there was a patient there, a woman. Every day I came in a little after 3 o'clock, a little after getting the report. I would always go into each one of the patients' rooms and check on them. Just want you to know I'm here if you need anything. And she would say, "Do you have paper and pen? Write down this recipe." And I would pretend to be writing. Now,
Oh,
I've never really liked to cook, but she was
right.
sharing with me some
Right.
really wonderful old Southern recipes.
Wow.
I would give anything to be able to go back and write those down again. I'm like, uh huh.
Well, thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that because my
absolutely.
mother-in-law she was born in Pietrafita, Cosenza, Italy, and we have been trying to
Oh,
convince
wow.
her for years, I tell you. And
Yeah,
I am putting this out there and I will send this to her personally. Years to at least do a family recipe for their
right,
granddaughters.
right,
And yeah, and I've said the exact same thing. I'm like, look, one day they won't be here. They're family
right,
recipes.
right.
So
Yeah,
thank you for
yeah.
saying that because I'll go to Easter and I'll remind her of that.
There you go. You're welcome.
Um,
Yeah, it is a regret. Even though I don't like to cook, I can't imagine what I could have done with that. But I'm always saying one day I'm going to write, like the medical, and really, it was a lot of fun working in geriatrics because older people can be quite comical.
yes.
And, we just had, every day it's the same people, and you become very attached. You become like family. And we just really had some funny things that happened. I'm always saying one of these days I'm just going to write a story that totally takes place in a retirement home or a nursing home
That's
or,
fun.
I think about this. She was 92 years old, and this was back in the 70s, so you can
Uh-huh.
imagine. 92 years old. Her name was Miss Lil. And Miss Lil, she called me nurse, nurse. She would hit things with her cane, nurse. But one day I saw her with a pair of scissors. Now, how she got those, I don't know, but I immediately ran over to take them away from her. And she was cutting a silk plant. And I said, "Miss Lowe, what are you doing?" And she said, "I'm going to root this thing in my window. I've got a glass of water." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Well, let me take the scissors." So she had cut the
Yeah.
silk plant. She took it into her room, put it in the little glass of juice, like a little juice glass of water, set it in the windowsill, and I just sat there and watched her, and came back out, and I looked at some of my nurses aides and the other nurses, and I said, "Let me tell you something. That thing roots. I'm out of here." It's like,
That's funny.
I'm going to join her once,
That's funny. But don't you find, just as you're talking about that they helped you with family dynamics as a writer, characters, you cannot write better characters than the people you've seen and know.
Absolutely.
You just can't.
Absolutely.
When I'm teaching
Yeah.
people about writing and I'm doing a co-op at my church right now, and I'm like, you write biographically. I mean,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just, I don't know about you, but my family has a joke that this never ends up in a story. You know,
Right, right.
it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I have had characters that have been, ex-friends. I have had characters that I know, but I'll never confess to you who they are.
Right. And usually people don't recognize themselves, in the story. If when you're like, this is who I'm picturing,
Mhm.
they really don't. They don't recognize themselves. So I was just back home up in Georgia last week, or this week actually. Ran into the post office, saw
Mhm.
the postmaster who I've known since we were pups, and he said, "Hey, was that me in that last book?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." And he says, "Man, I keep hoping I'm going to show up in one of your books." And I said, "You know what? I'm going to go home right now because I'm working on a novel. I'm going to go home right now and I'm going to write you into one of the novels." And I did. I wrote him in as a 15-year-old.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
fun.
going to be a lot of fun for him.
Oh, that's so much fun. So tell me
Yeah,
about this new book that you had, The Five Brides. Is
that's
that on
right.
number one on CBA? That is so exciting.
I
You
know.
go
I
on
know. I cried.
dates. Oh, that's just so beautiful.
I didn't know until my crit partner actually contacted me at 11 o'clock at night
That's cool.
through Facebook and said, "I am so proud of you." I had no idea. So not that I slept any that
Right.
night, but I was just really excited. It's based on a true story of Joan Hunt Zimmerman, 19 years old in 1952, came to this country from England with $30 in her pocket
Oh,
and took a job in Chicago where she knew no one, but ended up moving in with four strangers, four other women. And on a fluke, these five women bought a wedding dress together and then shortly thereafter separated. They all went their individual ways. But this was a wedding dress from Carson Peary Scott and Company, which was a coveted thing to own
mhm.
in the 1950s if you lived in Chicago. And all five of them wore the dress. And
Wow.
for years and years and years, writers have knocked on the door, on Joan's door and said, "Please give me the story, please." And she said no. But a very, very dear friend of mine happens to also be a very dear friend of hers.
Wow.
And because of that, she said yes to me.
Wow.
Um, so I went up and we did a lot of research. I discovered that the other four women had since passed away, so I just made up their stories.
Right.
But I interviewed Joan and her husband Robert,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
and he was so delightful. I just heard yesterday that he passed away
Oh,
within the last few days, which just breaks my heart because never were two people more meant to be together.
oh,
Um, and he was so delightful and so funny and just cracked me up with his version of their love story. So I got to make up four love stories and then tell this other
oh,
love
that's so
story
neat.
and honor these two people. Joan and Robert went on to create Southern shows. Which, if you were in Orlando, you may remember Southern women's shows, Southern
I think
Christmas shows,
so.
Southern home shows, Southern farm
I
shows,
lived there
Southern
for
garden
13
shows.
years, so that sounds
Yeah,
familiar to me.
yes. I mean, it's a huge thing out at the
Yeah.
convention center every year, and it's all over the South, and it's even creeping up north. But Joan started that. She and Robert started that in 1956.
That is just
So
so cool.
I just wanted to honor her, and now,
Yeah.
yeah, and now that it's and knowing that it hit number one, and about that same time Robert went to be with the Lord, I just think that's pretty phenomenal. I do,
Beautiful.
yeah,
It's true.
I do.
And again, I teach people this all the time. You just can't make this stuff up better.
No,
And then it's the
no,
truth, and that's just so beautiful. How wonderful is
yeah.
that?
And she gave me carte blanche. She said, "I'm going to tell you, and Robert's going to tell you, but obviously we're going to forget some things, and you're going to make up dialogue, and that's fine." She said, "I'm giving you carte blanche," and I said, "Let me get that on tape." But she loved it. She read the whole thing, and she said, she's very British, and she said, "Oh, it's almost like you were there, isn't it?" And I said, "Oh, yay!"
That's so well, folks. That makes me want to run out and buy the book
Hey,
because that is right in my love historical
yeah,
romance thing.
yeah.
So I want to thank you so much for coming on the
You,
show. It's just an honor, and you've made an impact in my life, and I know that you're making an impact in a lot of people's lives.
thank
Thank you
you,
so very, very much.
thank
And
you
I
very
want
much.
you all to remember that God has awesome plans for your life. So get excited.
Absolutely.